Well, President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met at the White House last night. They were not expected to meet again, but they announced they would be meeting again this evening to discuss the way forward in Gaza. With me now to talk about this, Congresswoman Claudia Tenney, who serves on 3 House committees, including the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. She also, as I mentioned, chairs the Friends of Judea and Samaria Caucus. She represents the 24th Congressional District of New York. Congresswoman Tenney, welcome back to Washington Watch. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, great to be on. Great breaking news from the top of your hour here.
So encouraging conversations taking place yesterday, at least what we heard from it. What have you been hearing? What more can you share with us?
Yeah, look, this is great news. Obviously, the president welcoming Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu into the White House with key leaders on his team, key cabinet members, with Marco Rubio and others, including Speaker Mike Johnson, Thune. Everyone's going to be talking about, looking like there's a future for peace in the Middle East, something that I don't think anyone ever imagined could happen. But I have to say it all started from President Trump's very novel idea of the Abraham Accords, and now his really bold and decisive action in moving in to stop Iran from creating and having the power to put a nuclear weapon together to attack not just Israel, but also the United States and other perceived enemies around the world. So it's really important that we continue on this mission and continue the energy that President Trump has put behind this issue. It could be just incredibly groundbreaking to actually have a potential prosperity. Some of the things that I think that you've seen in the meeting, of course, there was, an interesting moment where Prime Minister Netanyahu said that he nominated President Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. Well, I'm a little ahead of the game there. I've done that twice already during the open period when nominations are accepted, last year in January and again this year in December. I did add, though, in my nominations, which I filled out with the Nobel Committee in December, I added Prime Minister Netanyahu for his amazing work, and also former Defense Minister Gallant for his mastermind of the whole pager and other preliminary I would call them strikes or preliminary actions taken by Israel to really make it possible for them to set up the intervention by the United States with B-2s and others to eradicate the nuclear sites. So, but I think there's so many things going on. That's why I started the Judea and Samaria Caucus. And also the Friends of Judea and Samaria Caucus. It's really important to recognize the truth of the Jewish homeland there, Judea and Samaria. And not to continue on this fiction with Area 1 and Area 2, Area 3, and also make sure that President Trump continues to work with our partners on getting us to a point where we actually have a potential for peace and prosperity for the Palestinians living among their Jewish friends in a state, which, by the way, they already have. The Palestinians have the right to vote. They have the right to all of the freedoms that every Israeli has, except for the Palestinian Authority and their intervention and really taking the rights away from people. And I think that more and more as people see what's really happening in Gaza, I think they recognize that the Gazans, and many of them welcoming President Trump and his actions, and also actually praising President Trump, and many of them wanting to get out of Gaza so that they can be in a free democratic society that Israel has created, surrounded by authoritarian regimes in the region. So I see a chance for peace here, but we have to keep our the foot to the gas, because right now, if we slow down, I think Hamas under the auspices of the Iranian regime and other parts of the Middle East could intervene and prevent that from happening.
Yeah, I think history will tell us that evil will fill a void there in the Middle East very rapidly. We've seen that happen before. You mentioned Judea and Samaria as you chair that caucus there on Capitol Hill. The Prime Minister was asked about this last night at the meeting. He was asked about the so-called two-state solution. I think post October 7th, even Palestinians or even Arabs realize that this is not a way forward. He said the Palestinians should have all the powers of governance, but Israel would have to retain control of security over Gaza. So this is not taking territory, but ensuring security. So they're not talking about giving up land this time. They're talking about allowing some tribal independence, but Israel, the Israeli government, would be over all of the region.
Well, that's because the Palestinian Authority has proven that they cannot govern and create a democracy. They spend all their resources, and that's billions of dollars from friends around the world, and they spend it on terrorism. And they don't spend it on the people who are struggling and suffering in those areas that, 1 and 2 or A and B. And so, it's really important that, the Palestinians are engaged in peace. And I think something I saw in your ticker here was something that I thought was really remarkable, that I had a discussion recently with Governor Barak. He was discussing maybe taking the sheikhs of Hebron and moving them into the Abraham Accords,
Right.
and joining the Abraham Accords to create a so-called another solution that way. I don't want to say it's a two-state solution, but joining them into the Abraham Accords, because I think people are starting to realize that a terror regime, based on evil in an ungodly kind of way is not the way forward, is not the way to peace and prosperity. And just look at Israel, the innovation that Israel has sustained in spite of all the odds against them, and all the interventions and the problems happening from, state-sponsored terror, mostly coming from Iran, but also the hatred. And I think I think that almost they might be weary of the hatred and wanting to see a chance for prosperity and peace. And they've seen that other Arab nations have been working with the president and working on the Abraham Accords, and his trip to the Middle East, a month or so ago. Although a lot of people criticized him for not going to Israel, I think that was deliberate to show, I'm going to reach out to these folks in Qatar and Saudi Arabia and Bahrain and the Arab Emirates, and show them that we want you to be part of the Abraham Accords. We want everybody involved in peace and prosperity in the Middle East. It's not an easy task. I mean, we've had centuries, but you could argue decades of multiple decades of terror, where people have been indoctrinated to hate Jewish people, to hate the West, to hate Western civilization, to hate the United States, and moving them in another direction is not going to happen overnight. But let's start doing that from governments that are willing to come to the table. And I think that's what President Trump is really doing, is bringing these people to the table and recognizing that there is a chance for them if everyone agrees to a peaceful solution. Even meeting with, in a controversial way, obviously, with the new Syrian president, which I think was controversial. I was a little concerned about that he's surrounded by jihadist people. But if we can move everyone in a path to peace, maybe this is the way we do it incrementally. But again, we can never allow, as you say, Tony, that vacuum to occur where terrorism and the hatred seeps in again. So this is going to be dynamic, and it's going to require a lot of work on all sides. That's what Judea and Samaria Caucus is trying to do. We're trying to create this like-minded people to get together, not just in the United States. We're trying to link up our partners in Europe and all around the world to recognize this, so that it becomes a world situation, the world engaged in trying to make the Middle East, which has so much incredible history for mankind, to make it great again. And I think that's what President Trump's mission is.
I think with Iran defanged, there's a real possibility of seeing a resolution to this conflict that's been there. I think it's going to be a managed peace. But a final question, I want to get your reaction to the Likud party, the prime minister's party, petitioning him to basically exercise Israeli sovereignty over Judea and Samaria before the Knesset summer session ends later this month. So clearly the Knesset is moving in that direction too, recognizing Israel's right to exercise sovereignty over Judea and Samaria.
Well, there's also legislation in the Knesset to do that, the same, and I think that they're pushing him to do that, and I think it's a good idea. I think and by the way, everyone who lives in Judea and Samaria who's not Jewish, who is of Muslim or Christian faith or whatever they choose to be, can live in peace and prosperity under Israeli rule there, because it's a democratic society that believes in rights. They can access all the government resources that every other Israeli can access, and still have the right to do that now without the threat of the Palestinian Authority or Gaza or Iranian-backed different proxy groups coming in to disrupt the region. So I think I think that's something that we're hoping will happen, and we hope that we can continue to find the recognition of the historic Jewish homeland, and continue to have everyone in Judea and Samaria live in peace and not have to live under this sectioned and this sectioned off sort of strange, situation we have. And also it ends this whole fake discussion of the West Bank,
Right.
the discussion about, settlements that are illegal and disruptive. I've been to some of these so-called settlements. These are beautiful places where people are just farming and trying to make a living and work with their neighbors. And so it's just time for all that to end. And I think this is a good move by the Knesset and the Likud party. I really think that we're moving in the right direction.
It's a historic moment. And
yes, absolutely. I mean, it really is. I mean, I can't think of a time in my lifetime, and I've been around a little while, where we've seen anything quite like this, where we're really in a path where we think we might be able to, find a way to give the Iranians actually an opportunity for a democratic society. The great Persian culture, was eviscerated by the mullahs in 1979 and continues, to take the rights away from them. I think they'd like to be part of this whole Middle Eastern prosperity.
I think they absolutely would. Claudia Tenney, always great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us today.